Well, this has been in my head for 15 years. Hey, this is Carrie with Canary Quilts, and I finished it! I'm so happy with it. It turned out so pretty. And yeah, pretty for a Halloween quilt, but whatever. I love it. This has been, since I first did that pumpkin quilt that I showed you before. It had all the same pumpkins. It was fun to do. It was one of the first quilts I did with my mom, and I really appreciate it. And she taught me a lot with that, so here I am today because of that. But I always wanted something. I wanted something more. I wanted different Halloween icons in there. And you know, even other holiday icons or whatever. But I started with Halloween. I built my own icons and I did it. This is gonna hang by my spooky Limax village and it's gonna look so cool. But I wanna let you know that I'm putting these patterns out for you also. They're on my website. They're applique patterns and it's really easy to put together. My blog post explains how to do that, and if there's a link down below if you want to go grab these patterns and put these together. So if you're new here, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and we do all kinds of fun stuff like this. Yeah, so I'm going to just basically walk you through putting this together. I do show my quilting on it. I don't show my binding, but I show my quilting, and I show you how to put together a couple of these blocks because they're all exactly the same. You put them together exactly the same. They're just different icons and I love it. But so, stick around till the end of the video and I'll show you where I have it hanging in my house. So yeah, let's get started. It's gonna be so much fun. You can get this pattern and other patterns at our library access page at canaryquilts.com. Click on the library access and it will take you to the page where you can sign up and get the password to get into the free resource library, or you can click there if you have the password. Enter the library and you can type in the password at this time and it'll give you access to all our free patterns that we have up there. This pattern and other patterns are available on this website for you to download. Thank you very much for watching this video. Okay, to get started on the two face applique blocks, what I've got laid out in front of me is pretty much all you're going to need besides a sewing machine. And you'll need thread to do the applique, and I usually do that at the end. When I'm ready to applique, I'll start going through all my threads and pick that out. But you need fat quarters or fabric, scrap fabric. And I use light steam 2 as the fusible webbing that I use. You'll need maybe small scissors to cut out your inside of your patterns here, especially when we get to doing it on the fabric. I use just normal scissors because I'm cutting, I don't want to cut paper with my good scissors. I also have these oh, these are called hobby knives. X-Acto knives, I think is what you call them. And I just got this at Amazon. I got like 50 blades and 2 of these for $10 or something. But I'll link this down in the description below. You can check it out. I've never had these and I ordered it for this and it works out great. So I use those to cut all my pieces out. So you'll need to head over to my website if you want to grab the patterns there. There's a link down below for that also. And once you grab the patterns, I cut them out and I cut the insides out also where the lines are at. And then I choose my fabrics, and what I'm looking for is contrasting colors. Colors that really stick out from each other. So I liked these for the candelabra because the colors kind of had movement in it. So, and you can see down here in these how much the face really stands out when you have a contrasting color. So I've gone through and I've picked my fabrics for each one that I'm doing. So I have the cat done. I need to applique it. I have the Scream face and the Jason face done. I need to applique those. These are already done in applique. The Dracula, my pumpkin, which I love that blue thread around there, and my Frankenstein, which I used a variegated thread. So those are done, and these need to be appliqued, but they're pretty much done. But now I'm going to work on these, which is the candelabra, and these are the two fabrics I'm working with, and they're fat quarters, and you can actually get 2 blocks out of these fat quarters. So keep that in mind if you want to have more consistent color in your quilt, you can get 2 blocks out of these. So my pumpkin I thought would look cool. It looks like lights in the background, but then it's got like this green color, which would be, it really contrasts with the orange, but you know, it's in keeping with the Halloween spirit, with the green leaves or the stem. So I really thought those would be a nice contrast too for my pumpkin. Then my spider, I have like a dark purple. Oops, I think I picked something else up. Oh yeah. I have this kind of like a dark purple with ferns and floral in it. And then this light green beige to go against it. So that's what I've chosen for my spider. The bat, I've gone kind of a bluish green. So I've got like this fall pattern of blue batik and this kind of, you know, fern type pattern that's like mint green and beige to go with it. So I think those colors would look really nice with the bat. The ghosty, I have a dark green and kind of a yellowish orange beige. I believe these are the same, yeah, they are the same pattern, just different colorways of the same pattern. So that's what my ghosty's gonna look like. And then my owl. He's got kind of a fall pattern. And I liked these because just they have like the movement of feathers in the pattern is what I liked. And they're very contrasting and very owl looking, I guess. And you can go with any colors you want. I've kind of thought that this would look good as like a pink and gray too, throughout. The other thing I want to mention with these patterns is, let me put this up here so you can see it better. You can cut out as much as you want because all these cuts here you are going to have to sew around. So if you don't want to sew around all these, you don't have to cut them out. I would suggest cutting the eye out because that does give it the owl look. But on all of these, you can pick and choose what you want to cut out and sew around in the end. So I would just leave the major elements so that you can see what it is. So we are ready. I need to go and cut. So out for each one of these, I'm going to need from this fat quarter right here, I'm going to need a 10.5 by 6.5 and a 6 by 9. And the same for this, a 10.5 by 6.5 and a 6 by 9. So each one of these will have one of those cut. So in the end for the owl, I'll have 2 10.5 and 2 6 by 9s, but there'll be one of each. So that's how you cut these out, and I do have a blog post I'll link below if you want to read it. And then over here with the light Steam-A-Seam 2, I will need 2 at the most 6 by 9s to put on the 6 by 9s I cut out of here. So that's how each of these are going to be cut. So I'm going to get my pieces cut. I'm going to get these ready to go, and then we'll come back here and regroup and I'll show you what I'm going to do. Okay, I got the pieces of fabric for my owl cut. And I just wanted to show them to you. So this is the 6 by 9. And that's where, this is the 6 by 9 is what we're going to cut the owl out of. And then our background is the 10 by 6.5. So I've got them kind of laid out how they will look in the end, except the owl shape will be cut out. The other thing I want to say before we get to cutting is on one of these, you're going to want to trace it this way, and then you'll want to flip it for the other one. Because if you trace it like this, it won't fit. So you'll need to flip it to trace it. So just keep that in mind when we get to the cutting and tracing. But yeah, you can see how you could get more than one. That's what's left. You can get more than one block out of a fat quarter. Okay, I'm going to finish with all my other shapes. So I've got all my fabrics cut, and each template has their 2 colors, and each color has one 6x9 and one 10 by 6.5 cut out of it. So I have 4 pieces of fabric here. I also have 2 6x9 pieces of the fusible webbing here. And I've kept them together so I can keep track of which colors I want for each template. I've got my iron set up, and I've got my pressing board. This is the fusible webbing I was using. It's light Steam-A-Seam 2. I bought it in this gigantic box. I've had it for years. It was well worth the cost. And I just pulled it out and cut 2 6x9s. So this is 12 inches across, so I was able to just cut at 9 inches and cut it in half. And I got 2 that way. So I've got a link to this down below too if you're not familiar with it. And what we want to do is, let's just start with the owl, and we're going to do this with each pieces here, each template. So the owl, we need to separate out the 6x9 fabrics. And what you can do with the fusible, or the light Steam-A-Seam 2, is you can pull off the non-gridded side, and then we can just tack it right down onto our 6x9 inch piece. And it sticks there. And I'm going to cut off this extra because I don't want it to gum up my iron. I also use a Teflon sheet. But anyway, that's what we're going to do to each 6x9 in each template. And I'm calling them the templates. Like, this is the owl template. I've got the bat template. Each of them have their own fabrics. That's what I'm referring to. And because it's batik, doesn't matter which side you put this on. Come over here, trim it up. And so now what I'm going to do is, just to secure it, I'm going to take my iron and I'm going to run it over for about just a couple seconds. Like that. That basically adheres it, kind of adheres it, not fully, but so it's not going to slip around. So now what we want to do is we want to trace our template onto the back. So at this point, if it matters to you which way your owl is going to be, so the right side of the owl is going to be the light, and the left side of the owl is going to be the dark, like this, depending on how you trace it. So if it matters to you what it's going to be, then just make sure you've got it oriented correctly. So I have got, this is how I'm going to have it set up. So I'm just going to pin this right now to hold it in place, make sure that it's all onto the fusible webbing, and then I'm just going to start tracing it. I'm just using a pencil. Doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to kind of get the outline here. And you want to leave the seam allowance in here because that's This is what's going to be tucked under because we're going to end up sewing right here so that our nose and everything will match up correctly. And I am going to do the eyebrows and the feathers on the side. So I will trace those. I think I'll just do the 3. Trace the eye. And then I need to trace this line here. Just take it off, put it back on so it doesn't scoot. So there, I think I've got everything traced that I want. So I can remove it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it right now so I know to do that. So this side we did up, this side we're going to do down so we can have the other side of our paper will make a complete owl. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'll clip it. And now what we are going to do is cut it out. And I just use normal scissors. I don't want to use my good scissors. So I'm just going to start cutting around my tracing. Okay, and then I want to take my X-Acto knife and we'll cut the insides out. And there is 1/2 of our owl. That's what he's going to look like. So next we want to just cut this one out also, exactly the same way. So there we go. There's our 2 halves. So you can see when we flipped it over, we were able to make it so that it was one, so that they mirror each other. Okay, I'm going to finish up this block to show you how to do all of the blocks. So once you do this one block, you can do all the blocks you want exactly the same way. Cut your fabrics. Cut your pattern out, put your fusible webbing on the smaller piece of fabric, trace your template, right side up on one of them, wrong side up on the other one, cut out your template, and now we're ready to put our block together. So choose a side to start with. Excuse me, Snibbers, I'm showing people how to do things. So choose a side. I'll choose this one. And peel the paper off, and you can feel the stickiness on the fabric. And if you haven't ironed this yet, you will need to iron it before you start peeling this, because you want to make sure that you put the stickiness, the glue, on the back of the fabric. So carefully pull this off, making sure you've got glue on all of it. The nice thing about this fusible webbing is that you can pick it up and reposition it. So I'm just gonna do my best to center this. If you want to find the true center, you can do that, but I am just picking a center. So let's get this to lay down flat. And that glue will stick. It's not permanently on there, but it's stuck on there. This thing isn't going to move on you right now till you get it to the iron. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to do this one, but when we get all the backing pulled off and we start to lay it down, we want to make sure our pieces are lined up. So I just come up here, put them together, and do this so that they do not scooch on me. I'm just going to pin them together here so that when I lay this down, I can get it lined up with this other one. So I'm going to get this pulled off. Okay. Go up here and do your best to line this up, and you're lining it up with the other template over here and the edge of your fabric. So by lining these up, now when we're ready to sew these together, we can line these up and then sew it together. Okay, let's get this to lay down. Okay, so we're gonna, when we sew it together, we're gonna put the fabrics together just like this. Okay, we are ready to iron. So mine calls for a 15 to 20 second press to hold it down, or to glue it down. So you can put your iron right on this. I tend to use a Teflon sheet, which I have a link to this down below too, just because I don't like to get my iron dirty, just in case some glue squirts out. So my iron's nice and hot, and I'm just gonna go in here and I can see through it. I don't know if you can, but I can see through it, and I'm just gonna lay it down there and count to 15 or 20 and move it. So I'm gonna do that across the whole thing. Okay. Just kind of make sure that it's glued down. You can just kind of run your finger and see, you know, nothing's pulling up. So that's good. Okay, so that's how you get ready to sew your two-face blocks. So I'm going to go through, and all of the rest of my templates and blocks are going to be exactly like this one. Biggest thing you got to remember is to flip it over when you're tracing it. So right side up on one of them, right side down on the other one. So I'm going to get all the rest of my blocks ready to go before we sew, and then we'll go to the sewing machine. So I love it. Look at that, turned out so cool. I can't wait to get these sewn. Okay, I'm all done putting all my blocks together. I did every single block exactly like the owl that I showed you. And when I put them together, I pin this and line these up so that when I sew them, they'll go together, hopefully, perfectly. But anyway, I don't need these anymore. These are all my stencils. And I wanted to show you what I have left, and I'm just going to set these aside for future applique projects. So, there you go, leftovers. So what we want to do, oh, let's just go through all of them. So here's my candelabra. That turned out really cool. There's the owl. You saw the owl in the beginning. Here's my bat. And everything looks a little fat, but as soon as we get this sewn in here, we're going to eliminate a ½ an inch. So it'll look better. But he's pretty cool. I'm a little ghosty. I'm a spid ray, or spider, I guess. Huh, that's pretty cool. And then my pumpkin, look at these colors. Oh my gosh, I just love these colors. That is so cool looking. So what we need to do now is actually sew these together. And I've got my machine ready. I've got my ½ an inch foot in. Just gonna have a standard stitch. But what we want to do is we want to put these right sides together and we want to line our pieces up. And it's pretty easy to see. I get these open. So I'm going to pin everywhere where they line up so it doesn't scooch on me. I'm using clips. You can use pins. If it doesn't line up, you know, if there's a little bit of difference, that's fine because you're going to be doing a stitch over top of it. You just want it to be close. So, get them pinned like this so that all those edges match up. And then we're going to sew a ½ an inch down, and then we're going to iron this open. Okay, there is our first seam on our pumpkin. So now we can get it ironed, which we will iron open. And when I'm all done sewing these together, I will come back and just kind of get all the blocks trimmed up to the correct size. And that's how you do all the blocks. Lined up pretty good here. So yeah, that turned out pretty cool. I like it. I like the colors. I like the little smiling pumpkin. I like how close his eyes are together. Makes him look a little mean and cross-eyed at the same time, so not so menacing. It's just really cute. And I have like 10 pumpkin patterns. That was a lot of fun to do. It was like carving pumpkins without having to pull the guts out. That was so much fun to draw those. But anyway, that's how you put these together. So let's do the spider since it's the next on top. This one's pretty easy. Just match these two up right here. And at the bottom. And we are going to trim these blocks in the end, so don't worry about that. And get these sewn again, 1/4 of an inch. I'm using my 1/4 inch foot. And then iron open. Okay, so over at my machine you can see I've got my 1/4 inch foot in. And I'm just going to feed it through. I don't push it, but I hold the fabric on top so that it doesn't scooch on me as it's going down, because with the all the fusible webbing, it can get slippery against each other. So I don't push, I just hold it in place. You can use pins, you can use clips. I just keep my fabric kind of pressed down with my finger. And that's how you sew it together. So bring it down to your ironing board, wherever that is, and press that seam open. And our little spider's done. He's so cute. Did you ever think I'd say that about a spider? He's just so cute. So, pumpkin and spider are done. I'm going to finish the rest of my blocks out just like this. And then we can start to applique them. Okay, got everything put together. And we now need to pick our threads out for our applique. So it's going to look like this. Now I did satin stitch. And I'm going to stick with satin stitch because that's what all of them are. You can do a different stitch if you like. So I tend to go a little more bold with my applique colors, or my applique threads here. Again, it's just personal preference at this point, what you want to do. This one I did a variegated thread on. I love how this blue just really sets that apart. That looks really cool. So I've gone through, and the ones that I need to applique, I've chosen my threads for. So I've chosen like this rust colored for my cat. I've chosen kind of a royal blue for Jason. I chose a variegated purple for my spider because there are purple tones in this fabric right here. So I thought that would really set the spider apart. So I chose a variegated purple for the spider. And for my screen face, I have this variegated gray. So it'll kind of come off as white going around there. And from this pumpkin, I chose this teal. And I'm using all rayon threads here. I think they're 40 or 50 weight. So that's what I'm using here. But I chose this gorgeous teal thread to go around this pumpkin to really set him apart. Or her. Maybe it's a her. My bat is getting this kind of like light blue thread. My little ghosty is getting this bright green thread. I feel like the print in the green here kind of makes him blend a little more, so hopefully this green thread will bring him forward off of the fabric. And then my owl, then for my owl and candelabra, I'm going to use the cat thread, this rust colored thread. I've thought about a gold one for this one, but I think this one's going to be a little more difficult to applique, so I think what I'm going to do is just stick with a color that's kind of matches it. So cat, owl, candelabra are getting this rust color. And then the rest of my little guys over here are getting each their own colors. So let me get my machine set up to applique, and I'll bring you down there and show you how I do it. So a couple other things I want to go through before I start appliquing is in my bobbin I use bottom line thread by Superior Threads. It's 60 weight. It's really super thin, so you can get a lot of thread on your bobbin. It goes a long way. So that's what I'm using in my bobbin. This is newspaper print paper that I got through Amazon. I use it for paper piecing, but I found that it works great for applique. I used to use coffee filters as a stabilizer. You probably don't need one, but I like to use one just so that my fabric doesn't shrink a lot. I'll show you on the top. But the nice thing about this newsprint, really thin, and it pretty much covers my entire piece. So I can just put one sheet on the back of here. It covers the entire piece, and because it's so thin, once I'm done, it'll rip off really easily. So that's what I use as an extra stabilizer. Now, I've heard you don't need one with this fusible webbing, but I've just always done it. I feel like it still shrinks up, especially out here where there is no stabilizer. So this just helps even more on the back. So I just put it on the back, cover my cover the image on the front, and then just start appliquing over top of it. So let me get my machine set up to applique and we can get started. Okay, I'm over here at my machine, and I just took some scrap material out of my garbage, actually. This does have the fusible on it. I fused it on so I can practice and hone in the stitch I want, like the width and the length of the stitch that I want for my satin stitch. And what I've done is I've just kind of gone around testing different widths and sizes and then matching it up to what I had over here. Doesn't need to be perfect, but I wanted it close. And then I started practicing my stitch around to see if that's what I liked. Also, my machine lets me choose a middle or right zigzag. I choose a middle, and then I choose this foot right here that has this red, I don't know if you can see it, it has a red arrow. So I'm not having to watch my needle. I can put the red arrow right on the edge of my fabric here, and my stitch will go on each side of it. So every machine is different, so you'll just want to take out some pieces and start practicing and getting used to it before you get to your actual pieces. So, and then from here, you know, I'm just going to put that red dot or that red arrow right on the edge of my fabric. And then when I get to the corner, since I have to make a right turn, I want to make sure that my needle is on the right. And always needle down if your machine does it, so that when I turn, it will now start going this way. So that's another thing you want to do, is kind of practice your turns. I am just going to go right ahead and go into the candelabra because that seems to be the hardest. So I've just taken my newspaper print and I'm just putting it on the back here. And I'm going to start where it seems like it might be the easiest to start, just to give myself an easy time. So my machine every time I start it in this stitch will give me a lock stitch. So like I said, you just need to practice with your machine to get used to it, dial it into what stitch you want and everything like that, and then get started with your applique. So here we go. Always scary. So at this point, since I'm coming to the point of my flame, some people say to start reducing your stitch as you get closer If you want to do that, I would write down what your normal stitch is so you don't forget. When I say reducing, I mean like the width of the stitch. So I'm using 3.2 is what my machine says. So I'll make it smaller. Let's go to 2.2. We'll go up to the point. And then make our turn, go a little ways. And then I'm going to put it back to 3.2. So there we go. There it is. The outside is applique. Now, we need to do the inside, but as I was sitting there appliquing, I was like, maybe I want to do yellow on the inside of my candles. That might look pretty cool. So I'm going to sit on that for a bit. I'm going to come back and applique these later, either with this color or with yellow. But since I have the cat and the owl that I'm doing in this color, I'm going to get those done and then figure out what I want to do in the middle here. If I want to go with a different color. I will probably go with a more narrow stitch, like the 2.2 we did at the points. I will probably do a more narrow stitch on the inside also. So I'm going to set that one aside. Oh, that's what the back looks like. And the paper will rip off really good. Let me show you real quick down here. See, it's just coming right off. So that's why I use newsprint. So set that one aside. Let's grab the owl and we can get started with the owl. Okay, so doing inside applique pretty much is exactly the same. You just need to make sure your stitch, sometimes your stitch goes out to the right and comes back, or it could go to the left and come back. Mine goes to the middle so I can straddle this. But just keep in mind where your stitch is going so that you can make sure that you're lined up correctly. There's my owl. And you do get a lot of time to think while you're doing this. It does take a little bit of time, but I think I'm going to do the eyes in yellow, and I'm going to also do the inside of the candelabra as yellow. So I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to get to work on my cat, since the cat is also going to be using this rust color. So I kind of wanted to address how to go in a circle, at least how I do it. I just always keep track of where my needle is, and because I'm circling this way, if I turn my fabric while my needle is to the left, then I'll be sewing back into my previous thread. So you won't have any gaps. But you know, you can go a little ways, you can turn it only so much until you have to stop and turn a little more. And I've got my needle to the left, so when I start, it's coming back towards those previous threads. Okay, now that we're done appliquing, I have snipped all the threads on the front of my block, and now I'm just going to go to the back of my block and rip all the paper off. And it does come off pretty easily. There you go. So let's get all of our blocks, let's get the paper off all our blocks, meet back here, and we'll get all the blocks trimmed up. So I got my blocks trimmed up and I threw them up on my design wall, and I took some older blocks I had and threw them together, and then I tried staggering them, and then I mixed those blocks around and still had them staggered and wasn't sure. Then I moved a couple other blocks around, still wasn't sure. So then I went back to staggering and adding, and I was like, that's too much. And then I had them staggered with just a few, but then I put the white in between them, and that's when I was like, I think it needs sashing. So then I threw up some sashings to see what that looked like. And that's where I landed, was with some sashings in between the blocks and then in between the rows. Okay, I'm over here at my machine. I just showed you the picture with the sashings, and that's what I've decided I'm going to do. And I am now going to sew my sashings on to the appropriate pieces with a 1/4 inch seam. I've got my 1/4 inch foot in, and then when we're done, we are going to iron towards the sashing. Now I'm just going to iron towards all those sashings I just sewed on. So I've got my rows set up on how they were going to go together. Like my top row has the ghost, then the spider, then Jason, or not the ghost, the bat, the spider, then Jason, then the ghost. So I'm going to get them basically ironed together in that order. And that will be my row, and I'm going to iron everything towards the sashing. So I've done that for all 3 of my rows. Okay, so there are my two-face blocks with sashings in between the blocks. And as you can see, I separated them just a little bit to see what a sashing in between would look like, and I think I'm going to go for that too, which means that I'm going to have to cut, and I'm only going to go in between. I'm not going to go top and bottom, just in between and bind around the end, or the edges. So what that means is I'm going to cut for each, there's 2 little sashing rows in between, and I'm going to cut 4 12-inch pieces and 6 1.5-inch pieces. So I'm going to have little cornerstones in between. So I'm going to get those cut. They're going to be out of the same fabrics I used in the quilt, so that it'll be kind of scrappy in between. I'll try to make it so that it makes the blocks stand out, and we'll get those sewn onto our rows, and then we should be able to put this together and bind it. Well, quilt it and then bind it. So there I have the sashings done and the cornerstones, and I just kind of moved them around to see where they looked best, and I think that's where I like them. So these are just up on my design board. I need to, right here, put these rows together. And then I'm going to attach all 5 of my rows, and I'll have my quilt top done. Okay, here's my first row and my first sashing unit. So this is the top row. So I'm going to put it on the bottom of my row, and I'm going to take the cornerstones and this sashing unit, and I'm going to nest these seams. I'm going to line all of those up first. And I'll pin these edges, and pin in between. And then take it over, we'll iron it 1/4 inch. Not iron, we will sew 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to iron towards the sashing. Got it sewn on. We'll get this iron towards the sashing. Now we'll add our other 2 rows and sashing unit. Okay, there it is. I've got it all sewn together with my sashings and my cornerstones. And I'm not going to put any border on this. I am just going to bind it. So the next thing I'm going to do is find a backing, get my quilt batting ready, sandwich everything, and then figure out how I am going to quilt this. My guess is I will probably just do some outlines, but we'll see when I get there. Okay, I'm ready to quilt my little 2-face quilt. Not so little, but a wall hanging little. And I've been thinking about what to do the whole time, how to quilt this, and on my original one I did that inspired this quilt, all I did was outline everything. That's all I did. I didn't even quilt it. Probably because it was one of the first quilts I ever did. So this time, what I want to do is I'm going to go inside all these features and just kind of outline those so that they stand out. But I think what I'm going to do is stipple around, do a little stipple around the whole thing, and then do a bigger meander in between till I get to the next one and do another stipple. That's my plan right now. It may change as I go. That's how I quilt, but that's my plan right now, is to stipple around the edge, and that will really make it stand out. Have that little stitch, and then have the bigger stitch all the way around in the bigger areas. So I've chosen this kind of neutral thread. It is variegated. It's a sulky 40 weight rayon, and it's a variegated gray. I really like this. I used it on the on one of my 30-day improv quilts when I was quilting it. It does have a little bit of variation, but not so much that it looks, you know, that you can see it. So I'm going to use this to do the quilting on here. Hopefully it stands out, but yet doesn't overpower the quilt. So we'll see. I mean, you're really gonna see it on these dark areas, but yeah. I actually used it on this scream, and you can really hardly see the variation. Like, it's a little lighter up here and then it gets a little darker, but okay. So I'm gonna get my machine threaded. I'm gonna put a new needle in. I've got my bobbin thread is ready to go. I am using bottom line thread in the bobbin. It's very thin, it's strong. To me, the back of the quilt isn't that big a deal, so I'm just going to be using that. Okay, I just wanted to mention that I am using a Janome 1600P-QC. It's a straight stitch machine, and it also does quilting. So it's got this special plate you put in that keeps the feed dogs from coming up and moving your fabric. And I'm using HL5 7511 needles. I have found for this machine I need HL needles. Actually, I need HLX5 needles. And I've just found the 7511 seem to do real well with my quilting. So that's what I'm using in my needle. I love this machine. I love this, it's called a Sew Steady Grid Glider. I bought it because I thought I would need these measurements, but I've never used these measurements. But man, your fabric just slides on the back of this. It doesn't get caught on anything. Like, sometimes I would get caught on these ridges over here. So this has been a great addition to my sewing machine. Anyway, I'm gonna get ready to sew, but that's how I'm set up over here. And I wanted to share with you what kind of needle I'm using. You saw the threads I'm using. there we go. There's 3 done. You can see that I'm just going inside all of the features on the inside of the faces. And I'm going to go around. I'm going to finish the rest of these out, and then we'll come back and we'll get the outside stitching or quilting done. I hope it comes out on camera because it really sets that face in. It just looks so cool. Okay, I got all the inside features of my little 2-face monsters here all sewn in, or quilted in I should say. And it took about a half an hour. I went kind of slow. Make sure that I hit the edges real well. And then I took a break, stretched my shoulders out. And now I'm ready to start my quilting. So, like I said, I'm going to stipple, which is just like a small meander around all my edges. And then I'm going to break out once I'm done and do a large meander until I get over to my next little 2-face monster, and I'll do a stipple there. So, let's get to working. Okay, I got 4 of them done so far that you've been able to see, and you can see the stippling around the edges here really makes the pumpkin pop, the screen face. I mean, all of them are just really popping, and then I'm just filling in over here with something bigger just to quilt and fill in those spaces. That's all I want to do with that meanders, fill in the spaces and then do my stippling around all my faces. So I am going to finish this up and come back when I'm done and show you. Here's my 2-face quilt. Quilting is done. I did all the stippling around each face and then meandered in between, a large meander. And in the beginning you saw me just outline all of these parts on the inside, which virtually disappear at a distance. It just really makes that face pop right out of the fabric. So I think it turned out great. I think the side effect here that I wasn't going for was it looks kind of like there's lace on the outside of each of these. And that's pretty cool. I like it. And then the thread I chose on the back is literally invisible. You have to get up very close to see it. Now, if I'd gone with a contrasting thread, it might have been pretty cool. You would have seen all my faces and everything come out. So, but that's fine with me. I'm not going to be looking at the back. Let me pull it over. Show you this side of the quilt. So now I need to do a binding. And what I'm going to do is just cut scraps from all of these fabrics right here. And then put those together as a binding. So that's all we really have left to do. It's the binding. So yeah, pretty cool how it turned out from these paper patterns to this beautiful wall hanging quilt. And what's so great about these is you can just mix and match which one of these patterns you want. And I have a ton of pumpkin ones too. So you could have an all pumpkin quilt. Also, I have the pattern for my original inspiration. If you want to go check out that pattern too. I've got a link to that in the description also. So, I am going to get this bound. Yay! There it is, I got it all bound, and I did a scrappy binding kind of, where I cut the biggest lengths I could out of each fabric that matches inside this quilt, and then use that in the binding. So I can't get it all on here, and I'm sure I will put, I'm sure I have put the photos into the beginning of this video, or at least held it up for you. So yeah, it turned out great. I hope you like this quilt. I hope you, if you downloaded these, I hope you enjoyed putting them together. I'd love to see pictures because this quilt can be so different. You can do all of one pattern, you can do whatever patterns you want. And I've only done 2 of my pumpkins, right here and right here. But like I said, I have 10 of them that I did. So, you know, head over to my Facebook page or send me a message on Facebook. I really appreciate you watching this video. I really appreciate you following along with me. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, notification bell, so that you don't miss things like this in the future and all the other super fun stuff that I have going on this channel. I mean, I am having a lot of fun. So yeah, I really appreciate you, and I had a lot of fun making this video, and I will see you in the next one.